In this video, I want to show you how to make and apply a color scheme to your floor plan. So a color scheme is a really useful tool for you to begin creating a graphical presentation of the data that's contained within your model. So I'm going to do a really simple example here that will illustrate the function of each of the spaces here in my restaurant floor plan. Now, in order to do that, I need to do three things. I need to add room elements. Room elements actually represent the physical spaces that are enclosed within our building project. In those room elements, I need to add the data that I want to base my color scheme on. And then finally, I need to actually apply the color scheme and create the presentation. So let's start by adding the room elements. Now, we have a tool dedicated to this purpose on the Room and Area tab of the Architecture panel, and it's called Room right here. Now, I'm going to click that button, and I want to just move my mouse into the view window, but don't click. If I were to place this room out here, you would get this generic rectangular shaped room, and it would be unbounded. So that wouldn't necessarily be what you wanted to do. But notice that if you move your mouse into an enclosed space, it starts to conform the shape of that room to the enclosed space. So that's actually the feature that we want to take advantage of. The trouble is, if I move anywhere other than the storage and the two toilet rooms, notice that it flows all the way out and fills the entire restaurant floor plan. And that's because I have this open plan configuration. So don't click anywhere. Click the Modify tool to cancel. Let's zoom in over here in the area where we have our entry and our host station and so on. And let's look at another tool first, the room separator. Room separators allow us to do just that, separate rooms from one another. So when you have an open plan configuration, you can use room separators to divide the space into separate rooms. So I'm going to stick with the straight line tool right here, but notice there are several other shapes. And I'm going to start at the end point of this small little curtain wall by the entry, pull it straight up to this wall here and click. So that line now would divide that into two separate spaces. Now I'm going to do it again from the intersection of the curtain walls here across there. I'm going to close in this little opening here to the back of house. So that gives me a little host station area right there. From this wall here, I'll come across to this wall. The countertop does not define rooms. So you need to go right across the countertop as if it wasn't even there and ignore it. I'll go from this endpoint to right here. So that gives me this little prep station. And then finally, right here at the stairwell, I'll start at this wall, go to the bottom of the stair, and then turn the corner and come back right there. So what does that do for me? Well, if we pan slightly and we go back to the room command, notice that it now senses each of those spaces that I've enclosed as separate enclosed rooms. So that's the first step of making sure that our rooms will be enclosed properly. Now, the next thing that you want to do is rooms will automatically come in with a room tag, and that room tag will show us the name of the room and the number. The numbers will automatically sequence for us. So you can see the tag on placement feature is turned on right there, and that's that label that's coming in. And I'm going to move into this space right here where the entry is and click. And notice that in addition to the room, which is that blue tinted element with the X running through it, we also get the room label. And it says the word room, that's the name of this room. And then beneath that, a number 1. So the only thing you have to do now is pay attention to the numbering and make sure that you place these in an order that seems appropriate. So maybe I want the entry to be first, and then the host station to be next, and then perhaps I want the prep area to be the third room, and then I'll pan down here. Maybe I want the main dining room to be the next one, and then perhaps I want the kitchen to be next, and then I want to end up with the two toilet rooms and the storage area. So you'll notice that they all numerically sequence in whatever order you click, and then I'll click the Modify tool to cancel. Now notice that as soon as you turn off the room tool, all of the rooms become invisible. Now they're still there. So if you move your mouse anywhere in that room, notice that you can sense where that X was that was running through it, and you can use that to click and select that room element. Now, with a room selected, if I scroll down on the properties palette, you'll see its number right here. There's number 1, and here's its name. So if I put in a new name here and apply that, you will see that that tag will immediately get that new value. Now, the other way that you could do that is to click right on the room tag itself. It will highlight its host room. Then you click on the label and type in the new value you want, and that will do the same thing. So go ahead and rename each of the rooms to something more appropriate before we continue. All right, next what we want to do is go back and select one of those rooms again. And now we need to put in the data that will be used to generate the color scheme. And that data occurs in the same properties palette under the same general area. So I'm going to scroll down here past the name and number. And this time I'm going to put information in the department field. Now, I would argue that department isn't necessarily the right field to do this in a restaurant situation. We don't really think of this as a department, but I'm just going to borrow that field for functions. And so instead of putting in actual departments, I'm going to put in the function of each space. For example, the entry is a public space. So I'm going to type that value in right there. Now, it's possible to create our own custom field called function, but that's just extra work. And I think borrowing the department field for this purpose is perfectly fine. So what I'm going to do next is you can select more than one room if you like. So I'm going to find that little X for the men's room, move my mouse around, find the little X for the women's room, hold the control key and select it. It says I have 2 rooms selected. And for that department, I'll put in toilets. And then I'll come over here to this storage area, and this is back of house. Now, as you're typing in these values, Revit is actually creating a list. So if I come over here and select the kitchen next, notice that if I click in the department field, a small drop-down appears, and each of the values I've previously typed in are listed there. So I can choose back of house for the kitchen, and I could locate the prep area and do the same thing. And finally, for the main dining room, I'll just pan down here, select it. Maybe that one I want to give a new value to, so I'll type something in there. So now that I've typed in those values, let me zoom out a bit and let's go to the final step, which is actually applying the color scheme to the view. So to do that, we go to the Annotate tab, and on the Color Fill panel, you're looking for the Color Fill Legend button. So I'll click that. And if you're using Revit LT, it's all by itself on that tab. You don't have the other buttons there. And I'll click anywhere on screen to place that color scheme. Now, in the full version of Revit, you have to actually open up the space type dropdown and choose rooms. In Revit LT, it should go right to rooms. But notice that the color scheme should default to department, which is one of the reasons why I chose that field. And let's go ahead and click OK here. And it will create the color scheme based on the values that you input. And you'll notice that I missed one right here, my host station. Really easy to take care of that. If I just simply select it and assign that to a value, it will immediately take on the correct color. So it actually doesn't matter what order you do things in, because as we've seen with other edits in Revit, the editing is interactive and immediate. So this was a really simple example of a color scheme, but I hope you can see the potential of using a tool like this. If you think about all of the data that you could begin inputting into those room elements, you could create color schemes that reflect that data in a very graphical way, and it becomes much easier for folks to understand that information. So one of the things we want to remind ourselves is that the acronym BIM stands for Building Information Modeling. So what we're doing in Revit is more than just building a model. We're also creating a repository of information, and tools like Color Scheme allow us to get at that information in this very accessible way.